When I first started telling people about my autism and ADHD diagnosis, I kept hearing some of the same lines. It doesn't change who you are. We're all a little autistic. It must be mild. I never would have guessed. And I know that most people mean well. I really do. But those words can feel like a punch in the gut. Because instead of acknowledging my reality, they kind of minimize it. And if I'm being honest, I was, and sometimes still am, absolutely terrified of people doubting me. If you've ever felt nervous about sharing your diagnosis with others, or if you've already done it, or if you're thinking you're going to be doing it in the near future, and you're worried about walking away feeling dismissed, then you'll probably recognise parts of my story. And hopefully this video will give you more courage to handle it in your way. Hi, I'm Jess, that AuDHD mum. I make content to help you understand your neurodivergent brain and to remind you that you're not alone in this. Today, I want to share what it's really like to open up about diagnosis with family, friends, colleagues, and even with the public. Along the way, I'm going to give you the advice that I wish that I'd had, some reflection prompts for you, and hopefully reassurance that this is your truth to share on your terms. So from what I can remember, I started with my family. And I think that that's where most of us do. My parents reacted. At first, they were a bit confused, but eventually, as they understood more, they reacted really well. And honestly, that was such a relief. I started explaining more things to my parents, particularly my mum, and all the cogs that had sort of connected in my brain started connected for her too. And we'd known for years that I was struggling with things, but no one could ever put the finger on exactly what it was. So I think it was a bit of a relief for my mum and my dad too. But unfortunately, not everyone understood. Before I was actually diagnosed, someone told me that I had convinced myself of something that wasn't real. And hearing that really shook me. It made me question myself, and it planted this fear that maybe no one would believe me when I did get my diagnosis. And it also created a fear that maybe they were right. And even after my formal diagnosis, I still hear those words echo in my head quite regularly. So that experience is why I generally tell people to expect some negativity and then take anything better as a bonus. It doesn't mean that you're being negative, it means that you're protecting yourself. If you prepare yourself for doubt or minimizing, then any genuine support starts to feel like a gift. Hopefully one day we won't need to feel this way, but for now, that's how I unfortunately feel it is. And boundaries matter too. You don't need to pour out every detail of your struggles. You don't need to explain your whole history. And you definitely don't need to convince anyone that your diagnosis is real enough. So if you're planning to tell your family or friends soon, what's the reaction that you're most afraid of? And how would you like to handle it if that happened? Naming the fear before you step into the conversation can sometimes make it feel much less overwhelming. Work was actually probably one of the hardest places for me to disclose. I thought that telling my colleagues might help. I thought that it would mean better communication, maybe a little understanding, but the reality is that it didn't in most cases. Most of them weren't rude to me, but I could see that they just didn't really understand what this actually meant. A few colleagues actually started to infantilize me, almost like I was incapable. And then some people continued to treat me as they did before, despite me actually sending a document asking for some very minor reasonable adjustments. And that was frustrating because realistically, all I was asking for was really straightforward communication. I know a lot of you might be wondering, if you do work, should I tell my work or should I tell anyone at an interview? I would say just think about if you need adjustments or accommodations and if they will be helpful if you tell them your diagnosis. And consider whether you're disclosing because you want to be authentic or because you're feeling pressured from someone else. Disclosure can and should be powerful. And I would encourage anyone who feels that they can to disclose that they are autistic or have ADHD. These are just little things for you to think about. Sometimes it can expose you to biases that you might not have been prepared for. And here's a practical tip. If you do share at work, be clear about what would actually help you. Instead of just saying, I've been diagnosed with ADHD and autism, try saying, this is exactly the type of communication and structure that would help me thrive and do best in this role. That frames it in practical terms. Remember that you've got strengths, even if you have challenges, and they can utilize them strengths in your workplace, wherever you are. Be confident with that. So here's another reflection prompt for you. What is the one change at work that would make your life easier? If you can name it, that's what you should focus on when you disclose. So going public with my diagnosis was both terrifying and liberating. On social media, strangely, I actually got more support from strangers than I did from people that I knew personally. And that blew my mind, that people that I had never met could sometimes show more understanding and more compassion than those closest to me. But of course, there is a flip side. Some people online will dismiss neurodivergence as a trend. We've all seen it. Or act like everyone is suddenly claiming labels. And those comments do hurt, but they also show me exactly who not to waste my energy on. Also, everyone knows now that if you comment on this particular type of video, that more of those videos will show up right. So it's almost like confirmation bias for them. They comment something negative on a video, they see more of those videos, and then they think everyone's being diagnosed. That's something really important to remember. So here's a practical tip for you. Again, if you do go public, set boundaries. Block and mute who you need to freely. Protect your energy. You know your truth. You don't need to educate every single person, especially if they're coming in with bad faith. Most of the time, you're not going to change their mind. And as hard as it is for our neurodivergent brains that might have quite a strong feeling of needing to justify themselves, it's just not worth it. And if you can step away, you are protecting yourself. Ultimately, for every nasty comment you get, there will be far more with messages who say thank you and that they found your content relatable and that they're going through it too and that it's helped them in some way. And honestly, that's what makes it worth it. Okay, so how can you make sharing easier? Here are some things that have helped me. So preparing resources. Sometimes it is easier to hand someone a guide than explain everything yourself. And that's why I'm actually working on resources for newly diagnosed people. I do have something in the pipeline that is going to be something you can hand to your friends, relatives, colleagues that will help to explain what your needs might be. So make sure that you keep an eye out for them. If you want to join my email list, you can do in my Stan store, which is linked down below. There is already some free resources that you might find helpful. Okay, next one. Notice the red flags. If someone has been critical about mental health, or you've seen them be dismissive about autism and ADHD, maybe they're not the best person to have that conversation with first. It doesn't mean that they never need to know, but you can decide on the timing. Lastly, handle follow-up questions carefully. People might say things like, but you don't look autistic, or isn't ADHD just being forgetful? You don't have to educate them on the spot, but it's okay to have a script in your head, such as, that's a stereotype, here's a resource if you want to learn more. Talking about scripts, last week I released a free resource specifically to help you get through GP appointments, which I know is a common challenge for a lot of us. So if you want to get that, again, that's in my Stan store down below, and it is totally free. Here's another reflection prompt for you. Think about who you want to tell, why you want them to know, and what you'd like them to take away from it. The biggest thing that I've learned on this journey is that most people don't actually understand the day-to-day impact of autism and ADHD. They see surface traits, they see visible traits, they see things that are on the media, the stereotypical traits. They don't see the full weight of how it shapes our lives. They don't understand that if you've met one autistic person, you've only met one autistic person. Same for ADHD. If I could go back, I would tell myself, this is your truth. Those who don't accept it are the problem, not you. So whether you're sharing with family, friends, colleagues, or the whole internet, remember this, you don't owe anyone a performance. You don't need to prove your struggles, and you are not alone in fearing the disbelief. The people who matter will accept you. The rest will show who they are. To get those free resources I mentioned earlier straight to your inbox, don't forget my Stan store is right down below. I've also started my blog now, so if you want to sign up to that, again, right down below. I'm Jess, that AuDHD mom, and as always, let's make this space make sense for our brains.